Have you heard of the Azov Battalion? How powerful is the ceiling of the Air Force's combat capabilities? Let's put it this way. With a total force of only over 4,000 people, equipped only with light weapons and a small amount of defense equipment to confront more than 20,000 Russian troops, and the Russian army also having a large number of tanks, armored vehicles, multiple rocket launchers, and air support. In a situation of being completely surrounded by the Russian army, they still insisted on defending Mariupol for several months. No wonder it's said that the Russian army is not good. Even the Azov Battalion was promoted by Russia as the main enemy, which is enough to show their combat value. Some say they are neo-Nazis, while others say they are heroes resisting the Russian army. As early as 2014, the Russian army entered Crimea and launched a war. Whose Crimea was it at that time? Everyone is very clear. The large cities of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Mariupol in eastern Ukraine were occupied. The Ukrainian army and government were caught off guard by this sudden attack method. So there appeared self-organized volunteer troops in Ukraine, people willing to fight, and quickly formed new military units. At this time, the Azov began to take shape. Initially, this battalion had 400 people. None of them received salaries. Most had no combat experience. Almost half were students. After a month of training, the Azov advanced towards the occupied Mariupol and participated in urban battles. The highly motivated Azov soldiers fought with all their might. Within one day, the Azov liberated multiple cities facing such a powerful and elusive enemy. Russia chose to adopt a classic propaganda strategy. That is, accusing the other side of the crimes they themselves committed. This means that the Kremlin's propaganda machine began to depict the Ukrainian army, including the Azov Battalion, as bloodthirsty Nazis. Through this way, to rationalize Russia's attack on Crimea 1 year after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the Russian army did not achieve their set strategic goals and suffered many defeats in battles. A large part of the credit for disrupting the Russian plans belongs to the Azov. It has grown from a volunteer battalion to a brigade of the National Guard and is one of the fiercest combat units of the Ukrainian army. Russia has the Wagner Group, and Ukraine has the Azov. Since 2014, the Azov has participated in the main battles of the Donbas War. The reason why the combat capability of the Azov is strong is that their base training is very strict and not everyone can join the Azov. The Azov has a strict recruitment course. Those willing to join the unit have 5 weeks to prove their readiness for serving in the Azov. The 35-day physical and psychological tests cause most people to quit before the end of the training. Recruits have no names before joining the Azov. They are just a number. All they do is running, shooting, laying explosives, planning operations, and learning tactical medicine. If they can hold on, they can join the Azov. But this is just the beginning. After that, each soldier selects a professional field, including artillery, tanks, snipers, reconnaissance, and mine clearance. At this time, the actual half-year training of the Azov soldiers begins. The main principle of the training is to improve by 1 second through combat every day. In 2022, Russia planned to quickly occupy the Azov coast and form a land corridor to Crimea. But things did not go as planned. The 4,500 defenders in Mariupol became an obstacle. Their slogan was, "We will fight to the last drop of blood. We are not afraid of any enemy's tanks, missile attacks, and fighter jets. Every soldier will fight to the last drop of blood. We will eliminate the enemy in the air, on the ground, and on the water. Glory to Ukraine." Such a fighting will contrasted sharply with that of the Russian army. If the Russian army also had such a fighting will, perhaps the result would not be like this. The Russian army sent a large number of troops to Mariupol. The Russian army launched a major attack. For the Azov, Mariupol was their hometown and they were very familiar with this city. The stubborn resistance of the Ukrainians in Mariupol forced the Russian army to deploy troops that were originally supposed to attack other cities in southern and central Ukraine. A large number of shells were fired into Mariupol every day before the invasion. 430,000 people lived here. Now 80% of the buildings in the city have been destroyed. Among these buildings, many sheltered civilians in the basements. Eventually, the Azov retreated to the Azov STAL, the largest metallurgical plant in Europe. Its area is 3 times that of New York's Central Park. Along with them, more than 2,000 civilians took refuge in the 3-story underground shelter of the factory. Ukrainian helicopters flew low to the factory. They began to evacuate the seriously wounded and deliver ammunition. However, after multiple flights, some helicopters were shot down and the small rescue channel was forced to be interrupted. Volunteers from all over Ukraine formed a unit aiming to break through into Mariupol and rescue the Azov. Ultimately, the Azov battalion insisted on defending Mariupol for several months under the condition of being completely surrounded by the Russian army and eventually was defeated. With a significant disparity in troops compared to the Russian army, they were at a clear disadvantage in terms of numbers and equipment. Under the long-term siege, the Azov battalion and other defenders faced severe shortages of materials, including ammunition, food, and medical supplies. After the supply line was cut off, they were unable to receive support from the outside. Nevertheless, the stubborn resistance of the Azov battalion and other Ukrainian defenders in Mariupol demonstrated their courage and determination and to a certain extent delayed the Russian army's offensive plan, buying precious time for the defense of other regions of Ukraine.